a couple new approaches when thinking about your practice improv and songwriting. And everybody out there who's self-taught, take one step forward. Not so fast. Metal Bass Monday. So just a couple quick updates before we get started. The live stream for patrons for the stems for the song we'll be working on, Hellbent, I decided to push back a little bit. I had a few new people jump on board who had mentioned specifically they were coming on for it. So I wanted to add a few extra days so they would get time to download the stems, check out the song, and then we could talk about it on the live stream, make sure everybody gets included. So that's going to be coming up here real shortly. Check your accounts for that notice, and yeah, we'll do that probably about midweek. So, as always, thanks so much to everybody who's supporting the channel. That's really been a big help and everything. And because of the flux and the kind of conditions we're dealing with in life right now, I've had to move a few things around and stuff, but there is basically a flood of new stuff coming up because it's finally starting to sync back up. And also, for those of you that didn't know, I'm now working with Guitar Interactive Magazine. I'll be doing gear demos and some other things for them, and that's really going to help facilitate this. You'll also see those demos appear on the channel with some additional content more focused towards our stuff at rock and metal. But since that's helping out as well, much more coming up for you guys. I'm really going to be psyched. And so thanks as always to my patrons who've been helping keep the channel rolling and getting me that time to be able to do stuff. And if you'd like to be a patron and get some of this additional content or just help out, links below to Subscribestar and Patreon. And you can also just drop a tip in the jar if you want to for a one-time thing. And you can always drop a little bit of coffee in Rodney's old crypto mug of joy here. So my crypto wallet is below. So anything helps. Always appreciated. And you guys have been amazing helping out. So with that out of the way, let's get into part one. So I wanted to start putting out a few ideas to help you start thinking a little differently. And basically one idea is behind it all, but show you how it might manifest in a few different ways and hopefully shake up your playing. Because what I keep getting consistently through a lot of the people I'm working with through lessons and things is they get into a rut, or they don't know how to push themselves forward. They get stuck for ideas or don't know, how to get the wheel moving again. And a lot of this can come down to one idea, and that's always disorientation. Creativity comes from taking your safety away. It forces you to have to improv and adapt, and that's when you come up with interesting things. And there's a real simple and easy way to do this. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to get this to apply. We're going to look a little bit at some pivoting ideas, some ways of looking at creating chords, and some ways of creating runs, riffs, and that type of thing. So let's check something out. Now let's take something really common and apply this thinking. And again, what I want you to get out of this more is the thinking than the actual example. In bass, because we're usually in a low region, we tend to think across the instrument. We start from the bottom, move to the top. And an example of this is the fact that whenever we do pivoting ideas, or ideas where there's a singular droning note, almost every example is going to be a lower note, and the changing notes are on the top. That type of thing, or you've heard it all over, Tool, it's been around since the beginning of time, Metallica, things like that. And so when we think of pivots, guitar players tend to do this too. When they go into pivot riffs, it's usually a lower note and then, that type of thing. So the simplest thing is invert it. Flip it over and try and come up with some new ideas. So what's a simple approach to doing that? We're going to make our high string the drone note. Simple approach would be figure out your scale going up and down the neck, with whatever key you're in, and then we'll just do basic power chords, but we'll keep this note on top always droning. So you get things like... Simple idea. It's a cool little idea, you know, nothing monumental or anything, but it shows you that kind of idea of flipping over something you would do that might be kind of boring or repetitive or sound like someone else and disorienting it. You know, so always take whatever you have and see if you can do the inverse of something. And one, it's probably going to challenge you because it's going to become uncomfortable. Your chops may have to change. This is a great way of finding your chops weaknesses too, in that if you move all over the neck and everything becomes, you know, singular patterns that you're really easy and used to doing, flip those over, and now things become uncomfortable because you've become so dependent on certain patterns, you have weak spots. This will expose them real fast, and that'll move you forward in your technique. The other part is that because it's a new idea and a new way of thinking, you're immediately going to come up with stuff you might not usually think of because it's a different sound. You'll explore with fresh ears, and it's also going to be far more original. Hearing something like that as part of a bass piece is really going to stand out a lot more than the first version of it, because we've all heard the, you know, top-down pivot ideas. Starting something up from the bottom and having that be the consistent note and putting bass notes under it, you've inverted the idea, and now you're off down another rabbit hole. So it could be something as simple as that. Now let's try applying that type of idea to a simple scale run or something and see how we might be able to disorient it to come up with something interesting. What we're going to do is go into A minor here, and we're going to start on the 5th fret. Now let's look at our scale. We have 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8 on the first 2 strings. Let's just start with that. So let's start going up the scale, but grab a note and we're going to displace it. And by displace it, what I mean is come up with kind of a system or a methodology of causing a disruption. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, every other note, change the note I'm fretting to the note same fret but on the next string. So if I were to go, I would on the second note move that to the next string here. So go. Okay. Now let's try that here, and since this one we kept right in a row, we're going to move up to the 4th note, and instead we're going to play that on the same fret but 1 string up. So we would have... So now we're playing the scale out of order, but we're coming up with a methodology on how we're doing it. So you can start messing with different ideas and creating systems to throw at yourself to play in a manner you might not think of. So now, just by doing this, we turn that into... Now it sounds like something that might start to be interesting. So let's add that 5th into it. And since we have the fretted note, we have the displaced note, standard fretted note, displaced note, we're just going to play that one right back at home. So we'll go. Okay. How can we use that? You might use it as a melody. You might use it as a repeating bass line idea. Right away, you've got ideas to work with. Very simple concept, but it's like a number generator. You can spit out endless, you know, combinations of these things and come up with new ideas. And this is how you can basically never be out of ideas. If you're stuck for something, just sit down and go, I'm going to create a system. I'm going to use that system to come up with something new and fresh. Now, to be able to make it even less sterile and more organic and things, you can start coming up with really wild combinations of things. Like, let's say we take a Slayer riff, you know, not something that's just all their tremolo pick 16ths and 30 seconds. But, you know, say you have a Slayer riff and, you know, you like kind of the rhythmic phrasing of it. Figure out that rhythmic phrasing and then do something like this to assign notes to those rhythms. So instead of just playing the riff, play the same timing, but add this systematic idea of, you know, the pattern that you come up with or whatever methodology you come up with. And now you're crossing things even more. It's this constant thing of just throw a new spice into the kettle, see what it does to the overall flavor. And just be open to the idea of a never-ending stream of creating an arena for controlled chaos. You know, it's like when I was little, I remember I used to like these little paintings where you would actually put a cardboard disc on something that would spin, and you'd just take paint and drop it on it, and it would make these circles. And it would, if you just kept doing it, it would make these like psychedelic kind of, you know, black light looking painting things. And I could sit there for hours and do it because it was these endless combinations, and I could keep altering it, and the cycle just kept going. Basically the same approach to bass. Always randomize yourself. Keep yourself out of ruts by doing this. So let's take a real simple one that everybody will recognize and add it to this. Let's say to create a bass line out of this, I'm going to do this pattern, but I'm going to do it to the rhythm of the bass intro to Crazy Train. So you could go. Simple. Maybe not the world's greatest idea, but that gets you off in a certain direction. Maybe I change the scale that I'm doing. Maybe I change the notes. Maybe I decided to still like that rhythm and I toss in a new one. But constantly hybriding and randomizing ideas, whatever you do though, immediately as soon as you have that down, flip it over. Try playing this pattern backwards. Start with the highest note and figure out what it would be like going, using this as the top note and going. Now you got a different order. Constant randomization. Being familiar with things and doing things out of habit are the destroyers of creativity. And music's all about creativity, so here's two different approaches and two different ways of thinking to start randomizing your approach and coming up with something cool. Now let's look at a last one, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea on chords and something that we've touched on before. So what you can do, and it's a really simple and obvious idea, but a lot of people just don't think of it this way. They try and formulate chords or think about things rather than seeing it as almost a geometric study or a way of just connecting the dots. So let's say, let's extend a scale across about this much space, right? So we're going to go, and then we're also going to look at the next position of it and go, oof, I got a dead fret. Time to break out the files. And I'll go through it real quick. We're going to be dealing with these three strings. We're going to go 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 10, or 9, 11, 12. And then we'll add this one into it. 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15. So let's take a look at it and look at all those different notes available and just start laying your fingers on them in 3-note groupings, one after another, and see what you come up with. You can start by just doing the typical power chord. Then let's say we bar with this one because we know this note is there. Then let's try for something more complex. We've got this note here since we have, well, let's see. All right, let's do this one, and this one. Then we'll try this. See, I'm just laying my fingers on the dots in a way in 3-note groupings and seeing what I come up with. Just doing one grouping after another, and instead of trying to figure out, oh, you know, what chord am I changing to and doing this type of thing, allowing yourself to work from a visual visual reference that helps you run through things a little faster and lets you create kind of on the fly. There's my pattern, so I can decent sounding chords. So you can come up with tons of different ideas. And that's just looking at a scale, grabbing in 3-note groups, plucking them out. So there's 3 different ideas that you can use to come up with some new parts of your playing and push things forward. So try them out and let me know in the comments. Do you have little routines or things like this that you do use to come up with ideas? And if you try these, how do they work for you? Did you come up with something cool, something you liked? You know, link it up in a video down below so everybody can check it out, and that'd be really cool. So I hope you get some mileage out of this. Let's move on to topic 2. Now here's where I make all kinds of friends and start a bunch of crap. Not that I ever do that. But there seems to be a thing around the idea of being self-taught. For a lot of people, it's just a way of describing not having a formal one-on-one instruction. For a lot of people, though, when they say self-taught, I get the feeling they're trying to describe is they act like they just came up with stuff on their own, or they just invented things, or a lot of times it can come from kind of arrogant personalities. You know, I know we've all met the person, and maybe it's you. The one that's always like, oh, I didn't need all that stuff, man. I just figured it out on my own, or I just do what I feel, or I just learned everything by ear, and I didn't have to go and, you know, get a teacher or anything. That's just a waste of time. You just got to do what you do. Yeah, except no. There's no such thing as self-taught. It's actually impossible. There, I said it. You cannot teach yourself something you're fundamentally ignorant of. It's impossible. It doesn't work that way. There is no skill that can be taught without outside knowledge. So when most people say self-taught, what they really mean, or what they don't want to own up to, is that they learned by watching and absorbing information from their favorite players. There's no possible way somebody's going to convince me that they just magically sit down with their instrument and all of a sudden all this amazing stuff pops out of me. Because then I'm going to have to ask, well, how did you tune your instrument? If you were truly self-taught and you just started with no knowledge, you would be playing like some kind of weird microtonal music that nobody's ever heard of, or sounds like something out of the movie Nell, or it just, no. You learned to tune your instrument, you had to ask somebody at some point, or learn somehow. And then you learn to play chords by watching other people, because there's no possible way that you just magically heard groups of notes and went, oh, I know what all those are and exactly where they are. Nah, you're full of crap. You learned by watching someone, or you looked at a book, or you read a magazine. You learned indirectly from people. You are not self-taught. You learned from the people probably all of us did. It's just you didn't always wind up directly in front of them. You learned from Billy Sheehan and Alex Webster and all these amazing players that have been playing before you. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. So when you say you're self-taught, I mean, I guess that's a way of, trying to get across the idea that you haven't had formal instruction in like a classroom setting or with an individual teacher. But this pride I see from people who reject any kind of academics or a formal lesson or anything like that and have a pride in it, nah, you shouldn't really be that proud, honestly. And I'm not saying that you can't advance or be an amazing player by just going the course of watching people and playing by ear and things like that. Perfectly valid. What I am saying is that, one, it's not right to look down on other people who do actual in-depth study on something, because the one thing you do have to acknowledge is that you did learn from other people, but you just learned in a really incomplete way. You didn't get as much information out of what you acquired from that person as you might had you sat down with somebody and really dissected this information. You may have been able to, understand completely how and why those chords work that you played in that song, or not have to use the same pattern over and over again for your lead and that type of thing, because you understand how and why it was constructed, not just making little changes in it to try and hide the fact that you're still playing that same riff over and over again. So if that's the path you want to take, that's fine. Like I said, amazing players I know that, didn't go through formal instruction and things. And they're, if you're motivated to do it, great. But there is the point. You can't say that you're self-taught, because you didn't invent all this. And you learned by getting information from the same great players all the rest of us did. And again, my biggest issue isn't with the idea of people who claim to be self-taught or things, in as much as it is, I see a lot of these type of players who always kind of give the side eye to people who either went to school or had private teachers or went through online courses and stuff, and they use it as some kind of badge of honor that, oh, I was self-taught, man, I didn't need all that. Yeah, well, it also means you're way more limited than other players are. And two, you're full of crap. You did learn from people. You just didn't learn as much as the rest of us did. So, ego is the art killer. Drop that stuff, man. Everybody's approach is perfectly valid. The attitude is not. So, no such thing as being self-taught. How do you feel about that? Have you gone off on that trip before and kind of felt like you got a little ego boost out of saying that? Have you been annoyed by these people? Or are you a player that's done an incredible amount by just observing and using a good ear and that type of thing and gotten a lot of mileage out of it? What's your point of view? Hit me up down in the comments. Talk about this type of stuff. And I'm always interested to see, because everybody is an individual and comes up a different path. Everybody has their own viewpoint and thoughts about where they started and how they ended up. I know a number of self-taught people who, even come to me for lessons later and things and say they wish they would have done it earlier, or they thought it was, math or something that, they got put off by other people who tried to tell them that it was going to screw up their music or some kind of ridiculous stuff like that. And I've known some guys that are like, I've picked up pieces here and there, but I like my style and I got to where I feel like I wanted to be. So yeah, I probably could do better, but I'm good. And they're amazing players. So love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? And let's keep the conversation going down in the comments. So that's going to wrap it up for this Metal Bass Monday. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I always dig talking with you guys. And that's going to do it for this one. I will see you on the next one.